Okay, and I think we are live. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Live at 5, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. You know, this is where we're going to be. And there's Cheyenne. Hey, we got someone with us already. We got something special tonight, guys. We love Lindsay and Josh. They've been with us for a while. They're going to get a tiny, much-needed break, and we have a really special guest tonight. A lot of you guys might even remember her. I will introduce her here in just a moment. I'm going to wait till we get a few more people on here. I see we got one person watching, so we'll get a few more here in just a second. But she's an overcomer, which is what we're all trying to be, right? That's kind of our thing here at Immerse, is we want to overcome the bad stuff that's been going on in our lives, things from the past. We might be worried about the future, but the goal is that we overcome and do good despite all of the hard things that have happened. And she is a living, breathing example of that. And she has got a lot of good stuff for you guys to learn. And I'm excited that she's here and that you guys are going to get to hear her. But for now, just pop in the chat and say, hey, we might have some new people here tonight. And I'm really excited about that for sure. So y'all give me one moment. I'm actually going to individually text this link to a few people, as some have requested. So give me just a moment and we will get started here in a couple minutes. Hey, William. All right, let's see. There's Regina. Hello, hello, hello. I see we got 4 people watching, and I've heard from 3 of you guys. So if you're here, go over to the chat by the video and say hi, because I want to know who's here. If you are new, I am glad you're here, obviously. But for each time you attend Life Skills throughout the week, because we do live classes every day, for each time, hey, Glenda, for each time that you attend, your name goes into a drawing to win a $100 prize. So very good stuff. Basically, if you're here, I want to know you're here so I can count you for that, right? All right, see you later, William. I'm glad you came to say hey. I hope you're doing well. All right, Cheyenne, Regina, Glenda. That's who I can tell is here. If you are here and you haven't put your name in the chat or said, hey, go ahead and do that so I can count you. But we've got some more people here, so I will go. Oh, yes, look at this. We got 3 people just joined. James, Gabe, and Sunny. Hey, guys. I'm glad you guys are here. this is quite a crew. This is like 8 of us, so let's go ahead and kick it off. It's 5:05 in the capital city of Little Rock, Arkansas. So it's time to go. And welcome to everybody. As you can see, we have a guest with us today that's not Lindsay and Josh, who I know you guys are used to seeing. They're getting a little break after their hard work, but I am so excited. We have Miss Eleanor Fondren here with us tonight, okay? And my apologies to everyone who heard me say this already, but I'm going to say it again because we got a few more here. As you all know, the thing out of MERS is we want to be overcomers, right? If you're tuned in, I want you to put in the chat what it means to you to be an overcomer, okay? You can give me the definition of what you think it is. You can tell me about something that you've had to overcome in your life. But that's our thing. You know, Immerse doesn't have a mascot unless you include Scrappy, who may or may not be the official mascot, which is our little black dog. If you haven't been able to meet her, you should do so. But what we try to be at Immerse is overcomers, because all of us, we've had really hard things happen to us. We've been through what's called trauma. Those are things that happen to us that kind of make our lives hard and makes accomplishing some things really difficult. And so we want to be able to overcome that and be successful, even though we've kind of been through some hard things, right? And so one reason I'm so excited is Eleanor is an overcomer, okay? She's going to be able to tell you guys a lot about where she's come from and the things that she's had to deal with. And now she's got more degrees than I do. So she has overcome and done a lot of really good things with her life despite some really hard circumstances. So she knows all there is to know about overcoming, and I am gonna leave it to her to explain because she's got a really good perspective. So you guys, as you're popping in, continue to say hi, but I'm gonna turn it over to Miss Eleanor. Also, this is gonna be like super casual, like we always do here live at 5. But if you have a question or comment at any time, put it in the chat so that we can answer those questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and put on mute, and I'm gonna let you have the floor, Miss Eleanor. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me, Casey. It is a pleasure to be here. I am honored to be able to speak to you guys today, and I hope someone gets something out of my story and take it with you and be successful. Today, I'm going to talk about who I was, who I am today, and how did I make that change. We're going to go back to maybe about 8 years old. That's when my mom and dad divorced. Before that, I guess I didn't remember much. I think the divorce was a trauma for all 8 of us. I was the youngest in the household. I was 8, and my eldest sisters were 15 and 16 years older than myself. So by the time I turned, I guess, 10, they had already left and were married, because my niece and I, we're the same age almost. We're only a few months apart. So I was left at home with my dad. He had a lot of money. So he fought my mom and got lawyers and took the last 3 of us, which was myself, my 2 younger brothers. They're older than myself, but they're the youngest of 5 boys. And my dad had a business where he would let them work for him. And sometimes I began to work for him. However, we had no supervision because my dad, he was a supervisor at the post office in Chicago. So the majority of the time, we were unsupervised, basically. And the business that he had, it was a couple blocks down from where we lived. So it was right in the community. We were born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I know you guys probably hear a lot of stories about Chicago, about the crime and the gangs and things like that. And it's true. It was very bad in my community. However, it wasn't always that way. When my parents were together, when they married, it was middle class community. And the majority of my friends, actually my peers, they did well because they had both of the parents in the household to monitor, and they had the supervision. But because myself and my 2 brothers didn't have supervision, we made a lot of choices on our own. I had no females to show me how to grow up as a young woman. And I did not know that at that time. I would have never known. It took me years to know that divorce was a trauma. It was a trauma for me. So I found other coping mechanisms, and using drugs was one. Joining the gang was another. Around the age of, I say, sixth grade, my brother, I was in sixth grade. My brother joined a gang. The gang at that time, I didn't want to. I want to say they were as bad as they are today because we still have respect for elders at the time, and we would do things. The next door would come and comb my hair. I would go to the store for her, so it was fine, hanging out a little bit. However, my brother got into drugs. I didn't have anyone to supervise me or guide me, so he was that person that I looked up to. I admired my brother because he was all that I had to look up to. He was left a lot of times just to myself. He began to sell drugs, and he became a gang member. So I followed right in his footsteps, right along with him. And as a young girl, I didn't know anything about setting boundaries. I didn't know about, telling people no. I had never had to talk about sex. My mom would come and visit sometimes. She would come, but as she began her own life, the visits became less frequent. So I began to become very promiscuous and had no supervision. So my brothers, he was smoking marijuana. I followed. I followed for many years, and I got really deep into the gangs and stuff like that. And I don't want to say that I followed any of my peers, because a peer is someone who's equal to you. I kind of followed my brother's peers. I kind of got into his group of people, and everyone was much older than myself. We got into a little bit of selling drugs, and then it started to escalate. The gangs were not as bad, but it began to change. It began to transform when crack cocaine came out. Crack cocaine hit the scene, and that's when everything really went downhill for us. My dad, we had money, and that's why I didn't know. I didn't know how to set those boundaries. I didn't know how to tell people, that this is not good for me, because no one was there to teach me, because my dad was always gone. So basically, when crack cocaine came out, it really wasn't crack cocaine at that time. It was just powder. I began to experiment with that. We would sell bags of cocaine. I would go to school. I made it to high school. But before I went to high school, I moved to Arizona for a while with my sister. And at that time, she was much older than myself. I wasn't used to being disciplined. I wasn't used to anyone putting any structure in my life. So I decided to go back to Chicago. And so at that point, we were experimenting with selling cocaine. And in high school, I was kicked out of high school indefinitely because I was selling drugs, and I was a very bad active gang member at that point. I was hanging out with a girl to this day. She died in prison, and she was in prison for murder. She shot someone in their head and killed them. And so we were hanging together every day, breaking in houses. If you name it, we were doing it. And so I was suspended 3 times in a row for my behavior, gang activity, and I was kicked out of school indefinitely. I was not allowed in Chicago public schools at that point. So at that point, I began to experiment more with drugs. I started smoking PCP. I was addicted to crack cocaine, PCP, marijuana, and alcohol for many, many years in my life. So my philosophy of change was, I'm going to move over here. And once I move over here, things will change and it'll get better. So my sister moved to San Diego for a while. And at that time, that's when the crack cocaine really was bad. It wasn't that bad in Chicago. However, when I moved to California, it was a full-blown crack epidemic. And she didn't live in the best neighborhood. So right away, I found my familiar. And my familiar for me was more gang members and more drugs. And at that point, an older lady who lived next door, she turned me on to how to make crack cocaine. And I began to use with her. I stayed there for maybe a couple years, went back to Chicago. And at that point, that's when everybody I knew, I don't care if they were the preacher's daughter, I even got high with pastors. I'm going to be honest. Everyone seemed to be doing the drugs. Crack cocaine was an epidemic at this point. And so I fell right in full-fledged. The gangs had got worse. They were killing each other. People were killing in each other neighborhoods and each other communities. I began to hang out with a lot of gang members. My today husband, we've been together 35 years. He was a gang member. He sold drugs as well. And I got with him because he was like kind of like a protection. And I really wasn't really worried about being messed with because I did have 5 brothers. So a lot of people would not, too much bother me because they knew I had a lot of brothers. But that was the thing. I had no females. I had no one directing me. I had no one telling me things. I was doing the wrong things and making the wrong choices. I kind of knew, but I felt that as long as I wasn't hurting other people, that it wasn't as problematic as it really was. Because, you know who's watching. You never know who you're making an impression on. So be mindful of that in anything that you do. And so I got really deep into the selling drugs, and I started losing a lot of friends because of gang violence. I knew that I needed to change some things when one day I was watching TV. This guy that I hung out with, my girlfriend dated him for many, many years, and it was just horrible. I was with him 2 days before I was sitting there watching the news one morning with my dad. And they said, we caught him. We caught the guy who's been killing the women in the community. He basically he confessed to 67 murders. And the thing about it was, maybe a couple of weeks before that, I was sitting on my porch and he was walking past, and I was smoking some marijuana. And I was like, Greg, do you want to hit some of this? And he sat there with me and we smoked together. It was just him and I. When I told him I was going to proceed into my house, and when I went in, I didn't lock the door. I didn't do anything. But I was never worried about it because I didn't know he was doing it. I didn't know he was the one who was killing people. And my girlfriend she would say she was scared of him because he was I thought it was just basically a little domestic violence going on. I didn't know that he was really beating her like he was. And so one night I stood up to him and I said, you're not going to be putting your hands on her. I didn't quite say it that way. I don't know how I said it. And I kind of confronted him about hitting her. And I never knew this man was killing people. And couple nights before they caught him, he had a girl with him, and we were all at the park drinking and smoking and hanging out. And I said, well, I'm going to go to the store and get some more drinks. And she was like, well, can I go with? And then I said, well, let me see what's in the cooler. And I looked in the cooler, there was more drinks. And I said, no, I'm not going to get more. I'm not going to go. We have drinks. I don't feel like going. And she was like, no, let's just go get more drinks. And I'm going to be honest, she really didn't fit in because she was Caucasian and we were all African Americans at the park. And she was actually, come to find out, she was trying to get away from him. The only reason she survived is because she was nice to him. He killed one of my girlfriend's daughter, was pregnant with twins. He killed her. A guy who he basically beat he beat him obliviously. Let me get my words correct. So I was with him one night. He choked the girl and he threw her into a dumpster. And he was so scared because he beat him so he wouldn't tell. And then he went back around him and went to his house, and his mom and him made him dispose of another body. So he helped dispose of 2 bodies. And one day my girlfriends were saying, oh, he's buying drinks, he's buying drugs, May. Come on, he's setting it up. That's the way they would articulate that. And I didn't go, because I was around a lot of gang members and drug dealers. So I never had to go with somebody because they had drugs, okay? So I didn't go with him. And they were in his room, and he had dead bodies in the closet, dead bodies in the basement. Yeah, he was what you call a necrophiliac. So he would keep the bodies around for a couple of days, and he would sleep with bodies. So when I saw them on the news with him, I knew at that point I needed to change some things. I needed to get my life in order. That was just one of the things that had happened when I moved back to Chicago. I lost several of my friends. My best friend smoked PCP and killed herself. I smoked PCP every day. I smoke crack almost every day. And I definitely smoke weed and drink every day. And so it just was a a cycle, and I knew that I needed to change some things. But if you asked me, I wouldn't have told you I was an addict. I started to sleep around for money because my habit was increasing. So I would sleep with guys for money, or it was a way of me making money, making extra money, or whatever I needed it for, whether it was drugs, clothes, food, or whatever. Even working for my dad, selling drugs. I would try not to make it so obvious that I was using so many, because I would try to balance it out. I thought I had some control over that, but I knew it was some things I needed to change. So I said, I'm going to leave again. So we left. My husband and I left first. I moved back to California. He followed. I believe that's the way it went. I know he went back to California. He followed. And my sister had moved in, the lady who lived next door, and not knowing that the lady next door had turned me out on the drugs. My sister never knew that. My sister was not into drugs. She just worked and, took care of her family and stuff. When the lady moved in, I thought I was getting away from drugs, but I wind up using more and more and more, because I wound up hanging out with her more. And then I believe I was a part of why my husband started doing the crack. He was into other drugs, but I think I got him more deeper into that. He wound up robbing people. We were robbing people. Well, I wasn't necessarily, but I was just as guilty because I was with him and I knew what he was doing. He was robbing people so we could eat. He was robbing people so we can do drugs. And it was just one part. We were homeless a few times in California. We lived in our car on the beach. We got to the point where he wound up doing two years in prison, San Quentin, for a strong arm robbery. He robbed a store, and the security guard chased him, and he bashed the security guard in the head. And so he wound up doing some time, and I went back to Chicago at that point. When he was released, I went back for a little while so he can, have someone to come to in California. And we moved back to Chicago, and it just was worse. It seemed like everybody I was around and everybody I was associating with myself with were either selling drugs, using drugs, or a lot of my friends had OD'd and died from drugs. And it was a vicious cycle of that, where I don't think everyone was using drugs. I just think in my mind, sick people find other sick people. That's the way I want to say that. Okay. Because it seemed like that's all I attracted. So at one point I knew it was time to leave. And I kept thinking it was time to leave. I need to get away from here. If I could just get away from here, things would get better. Which I said, just one more chance. My sister moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. I may be telling this story in a little bit off of sequence, but it's all in the sequence of what happened, okay? But this was the last draw before I came to Arkansas. We were in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I landed a job working at the University of New Mexico. I worked in radiology. You tell me how I got this job. I don't know. I think it was through the grace of God for you guys who believed. And I was doing really well, except for on the weekends when I got my check. I got my check and I was spending almost $500 a night on crack cocaine. I wasn't hanging with the gangs anymore. I had realized at that point I was sick. I had a habit. And I felt in my mind that I could control it to a certain point, but I worked at the university 10 years and people think that's amazing, but they don't realize how many departments I changed before I got fired. Because I was calling in, I wasn't going to work, I wasn't, being compliant with my job duties. I was always late. I mean, it was just, so I would just switch departments at the university before they just fired me. One day I just resigned because there was no more excuses of why I couldn't go to work. And so it was because I was binging. I wound up in Albuquerque at a women's hospital for women giving birth. I was up all night and a lady came in and she was going through some type of psychosis. And when she went into her psychosis, I froze, which I needed to help her. I couldn't help her because I was still high from the night before. So I just kind of froze and my eyes were dilated. So they sent me for a drug test. I didn't take the drug test. I just let them know that I need to get myself some help. So I'm just going to walk away. And so they awarded me that, told me if I ever got my life in order to come back and work there. So everything was, I lost a lot messing with these drugs. So much that I couldn't even explain how much. At that point, I knew I had a real bad drug habit. So I didn't do anything about it right away, but I wind up working in a strip club. I was 39 years old, the oldest stripper in the club in Santa Fe, New Mexico, working at a club to pay my bills. And we were living in a very impoverished community, predominantly Hispanic. We were African Americans. I couldn't even understand my neighbors. You know, it touches all colors, all nationalities. So I don't mean this in any type of way when I say it. I'm just kind of describing, you know, where I was at that point. And so I couldn't even pay my rent. My rent was $350 a month. I was spending that much money on drugs. And we had a 1-bedroom apartment. And like I said, it was in a very low community. And we wind up leaving there, going into a hotel room on one of the worst parts of Albuquerque you want to live. That's where we winded up. I called my dad. I said, Dad, I'm coming back to Chicago. He said, baby, don't come back to Chicago. That's not where you want to be. Because at that time, what you see on TV about the gangs there, it was full-fledged. People were shooting and killing. And most of the people I hung out with were already dead. Most of them are not alive to this day. So my dad, he said, please don't come here. He said, I have an abandoned house in Arkansas. My brother left, and I knew about the house because I came when I was younger to visit. And he said, if you move in the house, I'll fix it up. And at that point, in my mind, I didn't want to come, but I knew that I needed to. I didn't want to go through this anymore. I didn't want to live in hotels anymore. I didn't want to keep saying that I was going to move around because I knew that wasn't helping, because I always found my own kind. It wasn't what was going on outside of me. It was what was going on inside of me that I needed to change. Okay. So I came down here. The house was in deplorable conditions. When I say deplorable, the roof was leaking in every room. It was holes in the floor where raccoons was coming up into the floor. When I took the windows down, the boards down, the windows fell out. And I had the boards up like 6 months, but it got so hot down here, I couldn't do it anymore. We had no air conditioning. I mean, it was just, even living outside of California at the beach, it was not my bottom. But when I came into this house, it was my bottom. And so I met a few people. This is not the best community. It's definitely not the worst. But the first people I met were people who drank a lot. And so out of my depression, I never did the drugs again, because I made an homage to my uncle whose house this was, that I would never bring drugs in his home. So at that point, I never did any drugs again. But I moved into the house. I backslid once. But however, anyway, so I felt that was my bottom. I knew I needed to change some things. I didn't know what I was going to do. However, living in all those places, I did one thing. I tried to go back to school. I remember it was times in California where I would have a candle in the car that we lived in, and I would be studying. I wouldn't make it far, because after I would get my check, because at that point, they didn't pay the school. They gave you the check directly. When I would get the check, I blew it all on drugs and partying, with whatever we were doing, you know. So I never finished past the semester. As a matter of fact, when I got myself together here, I started at ASU in Forest City, Arkansas. And I took one class a night. I was working at a factory. I got hired at Boar's Head. And I knew then, after working at a hospital and being a receptionist, that I was really at my bottom. You know, I had depleted all my resources, and this is where I was today. And so I started taking classes. I would take 1 and 2 classes a semester. I had to start at remedial classes. I had a GED. That's all I had. And because I didn't withdraw from my classes in all those other places, it had my GPA at a 2.0. That's what I had, a 2.0 when I started to school. And so I didn't give up, though. But I was still drinking a little bit. And with my attitude, I talked different. I was different. I had to go into a few of the instructors' quarters and tell them, if something else goes wrong, you guys don't know who I am. I just had an attitude from hell. I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna be legit about it. I had some issues going on where I didn't know how to communicate. I didn't know how to be humble. I didn't know how to direct my feelings without being overly aggressive. So I would have to go speak with a lot of the instructors on one-on-one when I was going through my moments. And when I said, you don't understand, I'm a gang member. I'm a drug addict. And they thought it was amazing. They were like, we never saw that side of you. We don't see that in you. I said, trust me, I smoked all these drugs for many years. I started smoking crack cocaine around 17. I did not stop until I was 39. So you guys can do the math. And PCP was my favorite drug. So, and I would talk to them. So one of them, she thought it was just amazing. I mean, the look on her face, because it was going on my third semester. I was there every day. I was doing what I needed to do and still working this job at night. She asked me to speak at one of her events. It was called Showcase Your Pretty. I didn't feel comfortable speaking because on weekends I was a raging alcoholic, because after getting off the drugs, I began to drink like 10 times more than I had ever drank in my life. But I was able to still sustain school because I was a weekend drunk alcoholic. By Friday through Monday, I was blasted. So I got accepted to radiology, to do the radiology course. And I met a few ladies there who were RNs. We're friends to this day. I spoke with one of them this morning. We do a lot of stuff in the community today. And I didn't feel like I belonged around her. I felt that she was too smart. I did. But I knew me. I was a survivor. So I wasn't doing well in class. And I told her, I said, I'm going to be in your study group. I'm going to be in your study group. That's what I told her. And she said, sure, come on. And it became more than that. I started to associate myself with other people who were different than myself. And we became the best of friends. She owns the House of Opportunity. And I have my LLC today, which is called Beyond Temptation. So I got with her and we would study, and I would tell her, I'm going to be over this weekend. When you come by, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to drink. And I stuck to my word. So when she would come, I began to have study partners, and we began to eat together. We began to go out together. We began to do a lot together. And I was to drink occasionally, but just not quite as much. And as I got into radiology, I felt that I knew something was going on inside of my head. So I knew a lot of times when people were sick, that it wasn't just a physical ailment, that it was a mental thing. So I didn't feel like radiology fit me. And one of the instructors said to me, you are such a social worker, Miss Eleanor. Well, everything you've already been through, why don't you try social work? And I wasn't doing too well in one of the classes. I had taken that class twice. So she said, we're going to sign you up for Arkansas State University. I'm like, I would never, ever get accepted there. They wouldn't accept people like me. I don't fit in. That's what I felt. I had the gang activity made me feel like I had high self-esteem, but actually it was the total opposite. I felt like crap. I felt like I didn't fit in certain areas. I still suffer from imposter syndrome sometimes. So I'm being honest about that, guys. It's still things I still struggle with, and I think that's one of them. However, I applied at ASU and did not open the letter, and I avoided the lady who helped me with the application on campus. I didn't want to see her. So one day I just told myself, I better go in here. I know I didn't get accepted, and she's going to ask me why I never came back. And she said, Miss Eleanor, did you get your letter? They've been approved you to go to Arkansas State University. I did not believe it. It was like an out-of-body experience for me. The first thing I did when I got to ASU without any further ado was sign myself into counseling. I went to counseling, and I actually went to AA in Forest City to the Restoration Ranch. I was the only African-American woman there. Everybody else was cowboys and white, and it was so cool. I got my sobriety there, and I began to go out and tell my story to people. More people would ask me about it, because when I went to school, everybody was saying They ask you who you are and where you're from. So what led you here? So I would have to tell them, I didn't go to high school. I have a GED. And I would just have to tell them because it it was just who I was. I could not lie. So I was like, I'm an ex-gang member and a addict. I don't know anything about, going to college. Well, I mean, going through the regular steps of, going through high school I didn't go to high school. I got kicked out of high school. I would have to say that. So people would think it was amazing. They would ask me to tell my story. And so it kind of took a life of its own why I do what I do today. So 2019, I won this award here. See this baby here? I made Arkansas State University Student of the Year on the state level and the national. That's for national. I won that for changing they thought my transformation was amazing. And it is, because it amazes me. I didn't speak the same. I'm just not the same. I mean, she was in there. She was always there because I had to have some type of resilience to make it through some of the things that I made it through. However, I feel that when I wrote my book, I have a book, you guys, you'll find it on Amazon. I talk in third person. That other person was the person who I needed at the time. That person who was the gang member, who was the drug addict, who was the fighter, who was the resilient one. She was needed at that time. And how I changed, I suck out different people. I associated with people who were not like what I was used to. Even in my uncomfortable place, I still went, and I still do that today. I said I still sometimes suffer from imposter syndrome, and it's a real thing. I've actually told my story to people who were not really, they don't really understand how I could be so in depth with my story. But for me, the only homage I have to God is for letting me survive that. And it may not be for them. I tell my story to help people who are just like me, who I was, because there's a lot of people out here who need that help. And go out of my way to continue to learn and to be around people who are different than myself, even in my uncomfortable state, if that matters. I hope it matters because it can help any of us, and we all have vices. So when they ask me to speak at churches, I tell them, you guys are standing there looking at me, but all you guys have a story. All you guys, I'm not here for show. I'm here because I need to save people's lives, and I don't want anybody to go through what I went through. The majority of my friends that I grew up with, who I was partying with, are dead. I think maybe 1% left. So at that point, I knew when I went to ASU and I was accepted, I graduated in 2020 with my master's in social work. I start this fall at Memphis Theological Seminary for my PhD in advocacy in social work. So that's my story. And I'd love to answer any questions you guys, because a little bit switched around the time of events, but it all happened. And it was even some things that were even worse, because the drugs, they led me to a dark place. And my mom, she was young, and I had to go back and I wrote the book about forgiving. See, because I could not heal until I was able to forgive. I could not heal until I was able to see where they had came from and their parenting skills. I take care of my dad today. He's 92. His dad died when he was 3. His mom died when he was 12. So they only knew what they had. They didn't know anything but what they had. And my mom, she was so young when she started having her children. She had 10 of us by my dad. And he was so of an authoritative figure that when she left, she was basically afraid. So she didn't really have the energy to fight because she was fighting him the whole time. So now they're the best of friends, and I take care of him, and she comes every now and then, and I take care of her as well, because I had to listen to their story, and I had to be forgiven in order for me to move on. So I know a lot of you guys in foster care came out of the system. Sometimes you have to forgive people who are not even aware of the damage that they have done, if that matters. So I don't know how much more time I have. I could go on and on because I'm a talker. But if you guys have any questions, I feel free. There's no stipulation on what I'll answer, and I would love to give some feedback.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to start by saying thank you for sharing that. You have been through some terrible things and have come out on top, and it's probably not easy to be honest about everything that's happened. And so I am thankful that you're cool enough with us to share that. To everyone watching, I really hope that you are as inspired as I am. Like I said, starting out, we're trying to be overcomers. Eleanor has done that, and you can too. I know some of you guys might be thinking, I don't have what it takes, or her life was harder than mine. I couldn't have done that. But if you're here today doing this, you already have the resiliency that you need to do it. If
Yes.
you're still here and you're still kicking, even though you've been through some really tough stuff, you already have what it takes. But man, Eleanor, I'm thankful for you and for what you've been able to share with us. And I will let you know about some stuff happening in the chat. When I'd asked our youth to tell me about some things they've overcome, we had someone say the exact words, "Honey, I overcame a lot." That is true. And I know this young person, and they really have. And I know that everyone on this call, can say the exact same thing. Another person said she really stuck through it and didn't give up. Yep, that's resiliency. And
yes.
If you guys that are watching and you haven't given up either, then you've got that same characteristic already.
Yes.
Yep. And I told everyone that I have that book. I have Beyond Temptation, and I love everyone to read it. And I already have someone in the chat who wants to take that book from me, so I will be giving it to her this week.
Did I give you the revised version? Maybe I should send you one out, because the ones I gave you, they had so many typos in them that I was just giving them out. I said maybe you guys can make some sense out of them, but I have some much better ones, and I don't mind sending you one over there. That would be an honor for me.
Well, we would like to buy them from you for sure. For sure, we would like to buy them from you, and we want to have them so that our youth can read them. Another person says this is really awesome, it's really great. Another person says these are my favorite type of life skills, and I actually agree. We have some life skills where people walk us through how to do a W-4, which is really, really helpful, and we need that. But sometimes it's cool to just talk about real life and how to get through it, because it can be really hard. I want you guys, if you are tuned in with us, any questions that you want to ask her, I'll give you some time to think. And I have my question as I was listening to your story, and quite honestly trying to make sense of it, because I mean, after all you've been through, it's amazing how far you've come. And I've studied just a little bit about drug addiction, not a whole lot. But I've heard that it takes several tries to kind of be like, well, okay, how do I say this? I've heard that in the cycle, there's a lot of times where you're like, okay, I'm done, I gotta change, but then you fall back into it. I hear that happened to you a few times. Did I hear you correctly?
Well, when I got here once, I was in a depressed state when I was drinking. Actually, I'm gonna be honest, this part I didn't tell. The reason why I wrote the book. My husband started having an affair, and I was drinking, and I was hanging out with a girl who I knew was messing around with drugs. And I think in the back of my mind, I kept her around because I said, just in case I want to do something, because right now I think I may do something. I kind of knew it. And I did it that one time. It was one time. And I asked her nicely. I said, you know what? It's not your fault. I don't blame you. Because I think it was something new I was going to do. But I would appreciate if you just don't come back around anymore. And that was it. With the alcohol, I've tampered with it maybe once or twice. But to me, sometimes I wonder, was I an addict or was I not? Because my husband and I broke up a lot of times because I was ready to stop. I was ready to stop, and I wanted to stop, but I kept going back and getting back on it with him. And is when so I don't know. I think it's different for everyone. So because I'm a social worker now, I believe in, let me see, harm reduction. That's my philosophy, harm reduction. Because it's hard for me to say, was I addict or was I not? Because I actually stopped everything before I really even got the help, you know. And so I see some people who go back and they spiral all the way down again. That hasn't happened for me. It's been 13 years. So I think it's different for everyone. That's just my philosophy. Now, I have a certification in addiction studies, so I know a little bit. So that's why I lean towards more towards harm reduction, which means if you're not a complete addict, maybe slowing down a lot on what you're doing, as long as, like if it's alcohol or something, alcohol, maybe you can reduce your usage. But if you're addict, most of the time, I don't know. Some people just spiral all the way backwards, and that didn't happen for me. I just used that day and never went back again. Or I drank one time and didn't drink again for 5 years. So it's just different for everyone. However, I'm an acknowledgement that is not good for me, so that therefore I don't surround myself with people who do it. And I think me going out speaking is my accountability a lot of times. And I'm aware of where I was and where I'm at today. I I just don't have a desire. And I'm just gonna be honest, for you guys who believe in God, it worked for me. So if you have any type of faith, whatever you have, get close with that because it works for me.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's like a supernatural, it's like a divine thing, right? So when I did go back and drink, I got deathly sick. So it was like, okay, now I see why I don't need this. It wasn't one of those things where I did it and I felt good and I wanted to keep going. It was like I drank and I got so sick that I couldn't function the next day. So I never touched it again for another 5 years. And I said, oh, it's my birthday and or I graduate and I'll have a drink. And it just doesn't agree with me. So maybe it never did agree with me. Maybe I was so young when I started that had I waited to this age, I probably wouldn't have drank anyway, if that makes any difference. So I think it's different for everyone, because I always had resilience to try to, I always knew I was, in the back of my mind, I knew that was going to be the rest of my life. But that drug, that crack was so powerful that you don't even realize that you're addicted before it's already too late, or that you're using as much. Let me use that terminology. And I'm going to be honest, I had the dreams, and they have what we call dreams about it, that I was literally getting high and I had the cravings in my dreams. And that was months after I stopped. So to me, I like to keep this universal. I don't like to get spiritual, but for me, it was a spiritual fight, if that matters.
Yes, and yeah, I appreciate that. I do think we've got some people in the chat who can definitely relate to you in that aspect. I know that I can too. But yeah. I think you make I mean, you are the expert on addiction here. I think you're right. It's different for all sorts of people. Someone is saying goodbye. Bye, Regina. I'm glad you're here. Something's come up. She's got to go. And I have another person who wants to read your book. So I am going to need to get a few copies from you, Eleanor. We can talk about when we end this call. And then we have another question. You may have already said it, but how did you leave the gang?
Well, this is the crazy part about it. When I go back to Chicago and visit, because that's where I was born and raised, people still will try to approach me with that same behavior. I left them because when they started to see what I was doing on social media and things like that, they kind of pulled back. Most of the gang members I hung out with were dead. They died. But they have new recruits and new kids coming up, and they've heard my story. So they kind of give me a little bit of respect in that aspect when I go back. However, I just kind of tell people that's not me. I'm a new person. I'm a grown up, but that doesn't matter because you have some adults who do gangs. I have had to tell people and block them off social media because of the way they communicate with me, as if I'm still that person. It's
Mm.
kind of crazy. And then I've refriended them back and haven't had a problem with them. I've accepted their. I've had people say, "Well, you're May May. That's my nickname or my street name or my name, my parents, my nickname." And they'll say, "Well, you're May May from A Trey, and that's what you're gonna always be." And I have to tell them I'm Eleanor, and I don't mind you calling me that. I had to get used to calling myself by my name.
Mhm.
I had to change the way I am in my approach. I was always told you teach people how to treat you. So at this point, it's almost like if you don't meet me, now you have to come to my level. I set the boundaries, if that matters. So they may look at me now as who does she think she is? I'm just going to be honest. But if I base my life off of what everybody thinks, then I would have never made it to the point I am today. And by no means am I saying that it doesn't matter what people think, because when I didn't care what people thought, I was making bad choices. But I just have to have some balance with that. And I have to teach
Yeah.
people how to treat me. Because I had to, I promise you, because I still was getting approached like I was that same person. No one wanted to even respect the fact that I was a therapist. I'm just going to be honest. So sometimes you have to build anew, and you have to leave the old back behind, and that comes with family, friends, people who do not respect your boundaries. And remember, I said that I didn't have any boundaries at first. Now I make it plain and clear, and sometimes I have to do it right away. And when I go back, I'm just going back to see my family most of the time. If I see people I grew up with and things like that, I say my highs and byes. So, and I try not to even correlate around that. But however, I do go into prisons and I speak. And that's, I always thought I was going to be able to go back and give to my community that I was from. But my community is everywhere that they have issues like this. Sometimes you just can't help the people who are the closest to you, if that matters. And sometimes you have to separate yourself from that. I'm just going to be honest. And that was something I learned in social work, in undergrad, in graduate school, that we can't therapy our friends or our family because they would never accept it. So I kind of get it. So, and moving on and growing, if there's toxic people around you, whether they're family members or not, you have to separate yourself. I'm gonna give a little bit of disclosure. I had to separate myself from some of my own brothers because of their lifestyle. I'm just gonna be honest. Some of the, like, I have a best friend and I let her hold on to that. She's not my best friend any longer, but we were best friends through grammar school. Through grammar school, we were best friends for a while when I was in Chicago before I left. And she'll write me and say, my best friend, my best friend. I let her have that. But when I go to Chicago, I don't always tell her. I hope she don't see this because her lifestyle doesn't equate for where I'm going in life. So I just don't always let her know that I'm there. And when we do see each other, she has to come to where I am at my level, and I just have to set boundaries for certain people, if that matters. And I let her have that because everybody around her has passed away, and I'm the only thing she really has left from that time for her. And I'm hoping that one day we even got into it a few times because we had some disagreements because she's always praising me about who I am. And I want to be that should be reciprocated. I want to be proud of her too. So I have to separate myself from her because it's not all about me. I want you to take something from this and grow and know that you can grow too, because we were both there together. So I'm not always surrounding myself with her when I go back because I can't.
Yeah.
For my own safety, my own sobriety, and things like that.
Yeah, someone actually in the chat just said boundaries are essential. I completely agree with that. And I actually just have an idea. Eleanor, we should talk about you coming on to do a boundaries talk with us. I think you'd be really good at that.
Awesome. And I'm excited for the stress relief workshop. In 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Yes, I have a lot of information on that, because a lot of times we self-medicate for stress. We have good stress
Yeah.
and bad stress. We need to know the difference. So I'm looking forward to that one. And again, it's still a struggle. Don't think that everything just got so better, because sometimes
Sure.
you have that inner turmoil and that conflict within yourself. Am I good enough? Do I fit in? God makes no mistakes. Everything that I went through, I try to use it as a learning experience. And he brought me this far to be able to do what I do today. And I promise you, I'm just awed by what God can do. And I'm not over Christianly. I don't go to church half the time. My temple is my body now and my home, okay? And this is who I am. It's more of a spiritual thing because I can connect with all type of people. But he took me through something so I can be able to help others. And like she said, if you're sitting here, you have that same resilience, and
Yeah.
just build on it. And it doesn't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built overnight, is a saying. Just take small
Remember,
steps. I do
guys,
vision
she
board
started her
workshops.
story at 8 years old, and then she was talking about being
Yes.
49. So if you're upset that you're not changing yet, don't worry. It takes time. It does.
It takes time. And you know what? Never let anyone tell you you can't. Because when I was working out there at the factory, people were like, well, you're too old to be going to school. Why are you going to school? You're too old. I make more money than all of them now. I'm just saying, if that's any consultation to anyone. So never let anyone tell you that you're too old or you're not good enough. Just know in your heart. And seek consultation. Utilize your resources. Casey's there for you. People are here for you. You have to kind of be mindful of who's helping you and who's helping themselves. Ask for, twine this, the spirit of discernment. Ask to be led correctly. You have to ask for these things. You have to manifest them. I do vision board workshops as well. I just completed mine the other day. I take small steps. I set goals for myself. Don't think, okay, I'm going to wake up and be a therapist one day. Let's try to make it through the first 2 semesters first. And then reward yourself small steps ahead. Like when you make it through the first 3 semesters, take yourself out to dinner, buy yourself a new outfit, chop them off small. And then as you see, you'll get closer and closer to the bigger goal. I shock myself sometimes. I promise you, because where I was at, I can't believe it. And that's where the imposter syndrome lies. When I sit back and I look at all my degrees, like, is this me? And I get so proud of myself. And I'll go out and have dinner. So you have to reward yourself. You have to love yourself. Do positive affirmations. Look yourself in the mirror in the morning. Tell yourself positive things about yourself. And start your day with prophesying blessings over your life, telling yourself today's going to be a good day. Keep telling yourself that. People can come in your life. They can be rude. They can be mean. They can do something to agitate themselves, because you've already prepared yourself and you already put your armor on before you left that house. So they're just not going to even be able to have a reaction out of you. But you have to prepare yourself every day for that. No, yeah. If you fall, if you're using drugs and you slip back, that is not the end. You can keep going. You have another day to get up and try it again.
Yeah, and that's resiliency. And that is something that all of us have. Even if you're just here on this call, the fact that you're here means you're resilient. You might not believe me, but if you don't, you should call or text me and I will explain to you why. Now, we'll have to wrap it up for this evening, but the good news, guys, is that Eleanor is going to be back for obvious reasons. She has lots of wisdom to share with us, and we want to hear more. And I definitely have plans going on in my mind about what we can do in the future. But for now, I will go ahead and say goodnight to you guys. Miss you all so looking forward to whenever we can all be together in person, which is hopefully not too long, but I don't know. But I hope that you guys stay safe. If you want to talk to me about what we've talked about tonight, or if you would even like to reach out to Eleanor, just give me a shout and we can maybe work something out regarding that. So I will go ahead and close us off for the night. You guys be safe, and we will catch you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.